What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Sloth Fab Garage. Today we're going to be working a little bit on center of gravity and airflow. We're going to be taking this winch and we're going to stick it down in between the frame rails. We're going to get our center of gravity lower. We're going to get more airflow to the radiator. We're going to end up with a really cool looking front end. Stick around.
Use your suck down. There you go.
Since we got the bumper off now, it's going to give you a really good view of how everything's going to look, and I can explain a couple things. What we're going to start with is we're going to take this plate here. This is 3/8 plate, and we're going to stick that right along the bottom of the frame, and we'll weld it on both sides before we do anything else. What that's going to do is keep the frame in line from twisting, from moving, from doing anything when we cut this center support out, which we will have to do in order to get the winch down in here. We're obviously going to have to rebuild this mount here off the back of the plate, but I'm not too worried about that. So we're going to do this, and the only reason this works is because I have full hydro. You could possibly do this if you have a steering box, but remember your steering box sits right here, and that's going to really impede being able to put a plate across here. You can probably scoot your winch over, but I'm not sure how you'd put your plate there. I'd have to really look at that. So we're going to go ahead, get the plate up, get some things tacked, and then cut away and see what we've got for space. 10 minutes later, and we've got a winch plate in place. Now you can see that this has got some gray on it. All I did was clean off the edges of the frame here where I'm going to be welding, and then cleaned underneath the frame so there was no dirt or rust or anything under there. And then I sprayed it with a weld through primer. This stuff is fantastic, dries super fast, works really well. And then I sprayed the top of the plate as well, just so we don't have any bare surfaces in between there. Now you can see we're a little bit off, so all I'm going to do is take my hammer, make sure that I'm flush with the end of the frame rail here, do the same here. Doesn't have to be great, but it does have to be flush so our bumper fits back on. I'm intentionally leaving some hangover so I have a nice place to weld, and I'll cut that off smooth at the end. So we're going to weld on the outside, a little bit on the inside here and here, and then once I cut all this out of the way, then I'll weld the rest of it up front and underneath that. So we're going to weld this in, and we'll take a look at what we got. The plate is on, the winch is in place. I'll show you exactly what we did in order to get to here. We've got our holes drilled out for the winch. It all bolts down perfectly. What I've got is I went center right here. Here's my center line. And we went out, created my 10-inch marks for the sides of the winch bolts. And then we did our gapping here. Now I am trying to push this winch as far back as I can. So I did cut just a little bit out of the bottom of this grill here. And all that does is on this side of my winch, there's some wires that come out with boots on them, and they would not quite fit there if I wanted to push this winch back as far as I could. So I made a little notch there. Everything clears now. I was able to get about another 1/2 or 3/4 of an inch backwards, which every little bit helps when keeping weight towards the back. That also allows me to potentially bring the entirety of this bumper in someday if I ever end up building a new bumper from scratch. For right now, we're just going to cut out the top and kind of slide it over the top of this whole thing. So with my winch stuff in place, I know where the winch is going to sit. And now the next thing is to shore up this plate. This is 3/8 plate, so it's very strong. It's very stout. We were lifting the entirety of the weight of the Jeep with it, or the front of the Jeep with it before at a single point in the middle. It was just barely bowing, but we will be putting a ton of pressure on it using the winch. So we don't want this to bow. And what we're going to do in order to keep that from bowing is we're going to put a rib along the back, and I'm going to probably go 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches high. I'll just have to see what I have laying around. I'd like something in 1/4 inch thickness, and we're just going to hold that up against the back, smooth with the bottom, and then I'll weld this inside seam all the way along there. And what that'll do is that'll keep this plate from being able to bow up or bow down or anything like that. If necessary, I can always run one in the front here as well, as that will be in front of the winch and underneath the bumper. I would obviously want to keep a little bit of cutout here, or at least keep it smooth depending on where I put my fair lead, so that the line is not rubbing on this front one. But we'll just have to see how stiff it is once we get the back one on. So we're going to do that next. With the winch plate sorted out, I am now waiting for my strapping in order to do my lips. I'm going to do a 3/4 inch tall lip on the front and a 2 inch tall lip on the back that's going to sit on the back side of this. So we're going to end up closer to 1.5 tall on the back. The back's not an issue. The front, we have to remember that our winch cable is going to be coming through here. So while I'm waiting for that, I started modifying the bumper. We cut the old fair lead mount off. That was all the way up here. You can see how much we're dropping this winch. And I went ahead, figured out how far down I wanted to go. We're going to be cutting the bottom lip of this off because it's basically in line with the new plate that we put on there, so that won't fit. And then I drew my line, got everything centered, and then I put my 2 holes in. With the 2 holes, I was able to basically set this here, run my bolts through, and then trace on the inside for my cutout. We got that cut out. We're going to do a little bit more rounding. We want this nice and smooth so our line doesn't get messed up. You could even overcut it a little bit if you wanted to. That would not be a bad thing, as everything can ride on the fair lead then, but at least you want it to be super smooth. So we've got that done. The next thing I think is to cut this bottom lip off and then take some measurements and cut a big chunk out of the top plate here, and we can see exactly how much we're going to have to take to get it on here. We'll set the winch, we'll take some measurements, copy them over to that, and then test fit a couple times until everything fits nicely. Took a quick couple measurements, marked everything up. Let me show you what I did. I measured from this bolt hole, which is one we're using on the current bumper, over to here. Same thing on this side. And then I put a plate across the front and measured back to the winch. This is currently secured by 2 bolts, so I know it's in the correct location. Took all those measurements, transferred them over to here, from the bolt hole to there, there to here, and then my front back. So this line is what I need to cut out. We're going to cut that out, and if we need to make any little trimmings or adjustments, we can do that afterwards, but this will give me a pretty good idea and get me pretty close to fitting. We also need to cut the bottom lip off, so we're going to do all our cutting, and then we'll test fit it. Well, it's late, but we've got our first glance of what it's actually going to look like. If I do say so myself, that looks pretty damn good. Obviously, we've got some finishing touches to do, trim the ends of the plate, fair lead on, clean up some stuff, paint. But we've got nice, tight tolerances all the way around. Our bolts line up. I did trim off the bottom, and I cut halfway through the corner, so this curve kind of almost rounds into our bottom plate here. So overall, I'm very happy about this. I think I'm going to get some of those round conical washers that bolts sit in, so that if you hit it with rocks and stuff, they don't shear the heads off. I think I'll get some of those for these. Just I don't want to end up ripping the bolts off the bottom of my winch or making them unserviceable. So that's probably an easy thing I can do. But other than that, we've got some cleanup to do on the inside of the winch, smooth all our cuts out. I don't think I'm going to make too many more changes. Kind of just clean everything up. I think at some point I will add a little plate here and here so I can catch those underside bolts on the frame. But for right now, since this is now just doing the hoop and not actually holding the winch, not super important, but I also don't want this to be less structurally sound than it already is by cutting some of this out in case I do need to use this bumper. So we will be putting some plates on the bottom. I might even add another bolt point here and here on the bottom to really tie it together. But overall, I think it's looking pretty good. Do a little bit of cleanup, a little bit of painting, smoothing, finishing touches kind of stuff. I did get the back plate behind the winch welded in. You can kind of see it back here. I do need to do the front one yet. I was kind of waiting as I've got to finish cutting out this tube that goes through. I want to smooth that out on the inside. So we've got a little bit of work to do on the inside yet. And then final touches and throw this whole thing together. So let's we're going to call it for tonight, but hopefully tomorrow I have a little bit of time to wrap this stuff up, get some paint on it, and we'll be done. All right, well, as you can see behind me, the bumper is on and it is complete. However, it's been several months since I actually filmed doing this and actually did this. I was editing my video and realized I never had a wrap up. So that's where we are today. Everything is freshly painted. Everything is on. You can see we've got nice tight tolerances all the way around the winch. Got our front and back lips in place. If you look in here, you can see it just about a 1/4 inch below our lip here. So not interfering with our winch line. I do not have the fairlead on right now. I had 2 pod lights mounted on a behind fairlead thing here, and I had to steal that mount for my XJ. I actually did the exact same concept, same bumper, everything for the XJ. That video is also coming soon, but we sunk the winch down in between the frame rails and back into the grill on the XJ and built basically the same bumper, grill hoop, and small stinger for that. So they kind of match, kind of cool. Something that I wasn't really planning to do, but I needed to get a winch on there, and I didn't want to have a big crimson chin winch bumper on there. So I thought, you know what, let's make a match. Anyway, this is all wrapped up. I did end up making brackets here, so tie in here. We also tied into the front bolts for the winch, so that's a nice tie-in point there. I didn't have to add anything, but I was able to get 4 mounting points underneath, so this bumper is pretty solid, even though it is still only doing the bumper aspect now. So got some wiring to do. We're doing a little bit of a wiring overhaul on this Jeep. I'm not doing that, thank God, but it is getting close to being done. Got sides cleaned up, everything painted. I think overall it turned out pretty nice. It was kind of exactly what I had in my mind when I first started this project. It really brought the front end of this whole thing together. Definitely more airflow, definitely lower center of gravity, actually gives a better line for my suck down. Overall, I think that's just a really nice upgrade to the front of a TJ to hide that winch. So hopefully you guys get some good ideas from this. If you have any questions or any comments about how I did this, let me know. Otherwise, likes, follows, all that's appreciated. But yeah, catch you on the next one.